see? Like this? It's that close enough? It's that okay? It's not. Is that close enough? Yes. Okay. Thank you. So they ask you to speak very close to the mic, the interpretation. So you can move this next closer to you. Thank you. Okay. Well, thank you everybody for being here. I hope that this will be a fruitful conversation. For those who don't know me, I am Patricia Diaz-Rubio. I'm the Executive Director at Wikimedia Chile. And welcome to this panel that is called Cultural Heritage and the Wikimedia Movement in Time of Crisis. I'm so sorry, I'm going to use my notes in my laptop. I hope that that's not a problem. So the context or the motivation to have this conversation today is that we are very aware that the world is losing irreplaceable pieces of knowledge, and all the time do wars, political conflicts, social natural disaster, and other type of crisis, climate crisis, for instance. This affects mostly museums, libraries, and art. That was not me. Okay, I'll retake. Well, this loss of content and knowledge affect because of this crisis and disasters affects mostly museums, libraries, and archives, but also external objects like monuments and public art pieces. As the world's largest and most available source of knowledge, the Wikimedia movement and its projects have not only the ability but also the duty to document, share, and therefore helping to safeguard these objects. In this panel, we will intend to show how we can accomplish that together, and why it is important, and what are the accessibility challenges, and how we can advocate to overcome those working together. So to talk about this and hopefully identifying new collaborations, I'm very happy to introduce some very special guests who will reflect about their own local and community experiences using collaboration and participation as a tool, whether to respond or even to prevent knowledge lost due to disaster and crisis. So we have Nassima Taboum. She's an architect, urban planner, and independent heritage consultant from Morocco, graduated from the Bartlett School of Architecture, University College London. She's a Wikimedian since 2018 and the co-founder of Wiki World Heritage User Group. Thank you, Nassima, for being here. We also have João Alexandre Pechansky. I hope I pronounced it correctly. He's a professor of journalism in São Paulo, Brazil. He holds a PhD in sociology from the University of Wisconsin-Madison and holds a research supervision position at the Research, Innovation, and Dissemination Center on Neuromathematics. He's currently the executive director of Wiki Movimento Brasil, and he's a board member of the user group Wikipedia and Education. His username across the Wikimedia projects, if you want to contact him, is Joaolpe. Thank you, João. Obrigada. And finally, we have Alcira Sandoval Ruiz, who is a cultural specialist at UNESCO Uruguay. Thank you, Alcira. So just to also, before giving you the space and the floor to present your experiences, I just want to situate a little bit this conversation. Before joining the Wikimedia movement in 2018, I was personally very involved in disaster studies. That's my master experience, and mostly in the study of narratives and local memories about disasters like earthquakes and tsunamis that happen very often in my country, in Chile. Since I started working for and collaborating with this movement, I have wondered how to conjoin these two topics, right? The memory of these physical and social fractions, like disaster, but also wars and political conflicts, and their documentation, diffusion, and mostly the lessons we can take from this to not repeat these stories again. So I'm really looking forward to learning more about your experiences as Wikimedian facing different type of crises, from disasters to war to conflicts to, like I said, climate change, and hopefully create new networks of wiki collaboration around this matter. So Nasima, please, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Patricia. So I will give some context to why I was involved in documenting heritage at risk or in crisis. While I'm Moroccan, a country that is mainly peaceful and where heritage is well preserved. Actually, before joining the Wikimedia movement as an architect and before as an architecture student, I was very interested in heritage sites that were not listed on the national or UNESCO heritage. So if they are not listed, they are not given so much importance and they are not well preserved. And we were working along with local NGOs in order to preserve or rehabilitate some buildings and some villages in Morocco. And when I discovered that behind Wikipedia there is a whole movement and there are other platforms and projects, I joined in order to document these underrepresented and underdocumented sites in order to catch attention to them, to encourage tourism maybe, to make people in my country and all over the world aware of their importance. And this is my beginning at the Wikimedia. So once I joined, I started working individually at my own level to document heritage in Morocco. And then, of course, after meeting a lot of Wikimedians in conferences or online, we started some collaborations to expand these activities to the North African region and then to Africa. And when having these collaborations and discussions, we discovered that even the UNESCO World Heritage is still underdocumented on Wikimedia platforms. So we created Wiki World Heritage User Group in 2020 in order to document UNESCO World Heritage, especially in countries where there are no Wikimedia affiliates. And when creating the group, we were thinking of projects. And our priority was the heritage that is going to be lost maybe next year or in a short time. And it was the UNESCO Heritage on the Danger List. And actually, as we are speaking now, there are 56 UNESCO heritage sites that are listed by UNESCO on the danger list. When we started, they were 52, but then some lists were delisted, some lists were added, and now we are at 56. And they are mainly threatened by conflicts, by natural disasters, or by mismanagement. So our idea was to try to document these sites in a way that not only helps us provide information to people, but also involve local people in documenting these sites. And in this way, we believed it will create an interconnection or a deeper relationship between these locals and their sites. Because in times of wars and mismanagement, for example, by a country that does not give importance to its heritage, even the people and the locals are not always aware of the importance of their local treasures. So by involving them in the documentation process, we thought that we are not only building information, but also building relationships between people and their heritage. And this is when the project WH in Danger came, or Win Danger. And the idea of the project is to select annually some sites that are on the danger list all over the world and try to connect with heritage NGOs in these countries in order to build collaboratively information on these sites on Wikipedia, Wikimedia Commons, and on Wikidata. As a start, we selected the countries where heritage is threatened by conflicts and wars because we judged that they are the most, like the priorities and the most urgent cases. So in our first year, we worked on Libya, Yemen, and Afghanistan, and it was in 2021. In order to proceed with the project, we tried to map local heritage NGOs in these countries that are already working on heritage preservation, but are not aware of the potential and opportunities that this Wikimedia ecosystem can provide. So we got in touch with 3 NGOs in these countries respectively, and after, of course, having their approval to collaborate, we worked on building their capacity so they can run Wikimedia initiatives in their countries. We were not going to document their heritage on their behalf, but we were just equipping them with the skills so they can do it themselves. So what we did is that in collaboration with these NGOs, we launched calls for volunteer trainers, and we formed teams of 5 to 10 young people in each country, coming from different backgrounds, and maybe it was their first time working on a heritage site. So for these teams, we provided trainings in Wikipedia editing and editathon running, in photography contest organization on Wikimedia Commons, and in how to run a Wikidata editathon. So each training was about 3 to 4 sessions, and we have all the training materials in WikiWorld Heritage category on Wikimedia Commons. Of course, we had to do these trainings in their local languages. So, for example, for Libya and Yemen, we did it in Arabic. For Afghanistan, we did it basically in English, but we had a translator for the group. And it was very important to be close from these volunteers and use their local languages so they can feel that we are not coming from outside and just trying to force them to do something. We tried to create a very friendly environment, and I think it starts with using the local language. So after doing these trainings, we had teams in each country that are ready to run the editathon themselves. So what we did, we just helped them with the infrastructure. We prepared the articles, the list of articles that should be created or translated. We prepared the program on the dashboard, and we gave them the tools and presentations they can use during the editathon. And at the end, we had 2 editathons run in Libya and Yemen, 100% by Libyan and Yemeni youth that were rediscovering their heritage through this process, through collecting the bibliographic sources, through organizing the photography contests or photo tours to their sites. They built a new relationship with these sites, and they had a more fostered sense of ownership of their heritage, because it was the first time where they are dealing with this heritage not as visitors, but as actors involved in its protection and documentation. But in Afghanistan, it was different, because when we were in the process of establishing this project, Kabul fell in the hands of Taliban in August 2021. So we had to change the approach. And it was a very strong obstacle towards continuing the execution of the project. But it was also an opportunity, because many international NGOs started, their attention shifted towards Afghanistan, and they were ready to do anything to help documenting and preserving this heritage. So our approach in Afghanistan changed, and it was, first of all, by expanding the scope of the project to any heritage site, whether it is listed, unlisted, whether it is known or not. And we launched a call for volunteer photographers in Afghanistan. If you have any photos of historical sites in your country, please upload them to Wikimedia Commons. And it was in collaboration with Arch International, which is an international NGO that wanted at the time to do an initiative for Afghanistan. So it was a very good learning for us. In times of conflicts and wars, unexpected events can happen, and we should be ready to adapt our process and our project to the current times. So this was the main highlights of the project. First of all, working completely with locals, equipping locals with the necessary skills so they can own the project and reappropriate it to run it in their countries. And then, if something happens, we should not stop, because our mission is to contribute in preserving and in raising awareness about these sites. And if a conflict happens or if a destruction process begins, it's the time where we have the highest responsibility and we should always think of solutions. So as a result, we had some amazing photos from Libya, which is a country that suffered from war for many years and where heritage became not a priority at all to people. And having these photos and advertising them also on social media in the events run by the local NGO helped people to reconnect with these sites and to re-see their country through the prism of its beauty, its culture, its art, instead of just the war and the political circumstances. This was the same thing in Yemen, and the photos we could gather, we could collect, and also the database on Wikidata and the articles on Wikipedia helped us all to see Yemen through a very different prism. It was no longer this war zone, this country in conflict, but it was all this know-how, as they have 3 cities listed as World Heritage with their social layers, crafts layers, buildings, streets, etc. Everything became documented on Wikimedia Commons. And in the beginning, like before the project, we had very few photos on Commons of these cities. And in Afghanistan, we could finally gather around 120 photos of many sites that were maybe never documented on Wikimedia Commons and that had no existence on internet. And not only the photos, but also their metadata and some descriptions with the local language. And we can never be grateful enough for our collaborators and also these young people who, despite the very harsh conditions, they understood the importance of documenting their heritage, and they generously contributed to the project. And alongside with these 3 countries, we also worked with Wikimedia user groups in Guinea, Tanzania, Congo to document their heritage sites in danger. And when collaborating with Wikimedia affiliates, it was a little bit easier because we didn't have to do any trainings. People were already well trained. But our role was to reshift their attention to their heritage, because in a local Wikimedia affiliates, the members can have different interests. Maybe they are not interested in heritage. So through the project, we could pool the efforts of several affiliates to document their endangered heritage. Thank you.
Thank you, Nassima. Joao, please. Yeah, a little bit closer to the mic.
Okay, so can you hear me? Yeah. So I'm going to say the first things I'm going to speak Portuguese. So if you didn't get, or if you need a translation system, just should grab one. Bom, primeiro.
First of all, thank you and good morning, everyone. I would like to thank you for being here today. Also, thank you for allowing us to hold this exciting debate. Thank you, Alcira, for being here. Thank you to the interpreters as well. I can see Marise, who is here. Thank you to the organization that allowed us to use our own language. Today, I will be addressing 2 perspectives of an emblematic case. Selina mentioned it yesterday when she talked about disasters and showed some images. She talked about the fire of the National Museum in September of 2018. This is the oldest cultural institution in Brazil, which was completely destroyed at that time. It had 20 million objects in its collection. First of all, I would like to talk about social technical infrastructure within the Wikimedians initiative. They collected information and content and produced content about the fire. And the second perspective is more political. It has to do with our role as a community, as a movement, in connection with free knowledge, and it has to do with the harsh reality that global South countries face. This entails that knowledge has a certain validity date. Curiously enough, I talked about this more social and technical presentation. This is something we did right after the fire, and many of us were watching the fire take place on TV. In the 2019 Tel Aviv GLAM, this became a landmark for our community, and it became very important. It's very important for our community to be quick enough and adaptable and flexible when it comes to acting in this kind of disaster. This National Museum initiative had two objectives. Number one, there was a multilingual call to upload the information to Wikimedia Commons. This was advertised at the top of the project and also through our social media accounts. The second perspective of the initiative involved coordinating with Wikimedians to curate knowledge and produce information regarding the fire, its causes, research in its causes, etc. They were in charge of creating the multimedia files that would be uploaded in the analysis process when they were looking for a specific statue that we needed to document.
Content creation was done from Wikipedia in different languages: Portuguese, Catalan, English, Spanish, French mainly. We also edited wiki sources in Portuguese, French, and we used Wikidata. The initiative became a flagship initiative, so it was documented from different academic sectors. Since 2018, I've counted 6 academic articles and 3 PhD dissertations on this particular topic. And this initiative, well, a group of friends and me didn't sleep for a few days to make it happen, was considered a digital crowd sourcing in response to a cultural disaster, a collaborative archive of data, or a social technical response to an emergency. We also used a number of technologies. Some of them we developed for this page generation called Techland, a coordination tool for Wikipedians called Brarable. We've developed new infrastructure to use bots like the one we use on Wikipedia called Hysteria, and some features of a technology called Tabernacle. And if you have technical skills, we use Python, Scrap, and other technologies at the service of providing a community response to what we saw was happening. After the fire, we uploaded 2,200 media articles by 129 users for a total of over 4,000 images in the National Museum, and 75% of the users were people who had never, before that fire, had edited in any project, in any Commons or Wiki project. The number of views was incredible, and the picture that Selena showed yesterday became the image for the fire, and it was used in all contexts. Although we had around 4,000 images, that one in particular was used because the Wikimedian took that picture while the fire was still going on. That was September 2018. So a month after the fire, 156 million, we had 156 million views of the images that we uploaded, and that made a more long-lasting impact. 8 years went by. This happened in 2018, as I just mentioned. And there were different emergency initiatives like the one of the National Museum. I feel are better suited for me and people that participate as well. Because on the one hand, it did work out. We were able to do what we needed to do. It was a reaction to a cultural destruction that had been announced. So now I would like to take a more political approach to what happened. After 5 years, since 5 years have gone by, as Wikimedians, we are used to, well, devoting our skills to producing knowledge, to open and create more knowledge, but our ecosystem, as reflected in this room, we are increasingly taking on a more political role. We do have an advocacy role on knowledge. Therefore, we need to play a significant part in protecting our cultural heritage. Whistleblowers, we're in a way whistleblowers for culture, right? I believe the cause of that fire to be neoliberalism, and it is a political and economical approach to organizing resources. There's little or non-existent investment in culture, and there are organized actions against organizations that want to protect culture, and the pandemic in the global south made this reality even worse, not only in Brazil but in other regions in the global south. We are living a catastrophe, and the cultural sector is the most severely affected, and it was more severely affected due to the pandemic. Revenue of many institutions went significantly down, and for the smallest organizations, this took a big toll and led to a disappearance of 15 to 20% of the disappearance of cultural institutions as of 2020. In Sao Paulo, my state, we went from having around 40 or 50 circus groups to only 6 after the pandemic. So that is a significant blow to our culture. And our reaction to the events in the National Museum was a reaction to a disaster. Now, we cannot just run behind the neoliberal destruction of culture. We need to put a stop to it. So, as Wikimedians, as a member myself, I believe that we should just not just build the technical infrastructure, but we need to stop this from happening and adopt a more an advocacy approach and try to forecast and foresee these type of catastrophic events to protect our cultural heritage. For example, the members of our movement should be more closely connected to the digital rights network and to defend and the networks that defend our heritage, and those networks do exist in the global south, as they mentioned before. We need to align the world. We see the world with free knowledge We need to fight to defend our cultural heritage. There are campaigns, there are initiatives for this mission. As the largest archive for cultural heritage, and we should create models not only to contribute content from a technical standpoint, but rather promoting the work of cultural institutions and their efforts to preserve these resources and have enabling cultural and political structure. My colleague Lucas in the afternoon will present a methodology for that legal infrastructure, but we have other initiatives around these structures on digital rights. We also have multidisciplinary structures where we align and coordinate with different state agencies. For example, in Brazil, we have links to different institutions, state agencies, who are ultimately responsible for preservation. And sometimes we can engage different Wikimedians with these institutions to be more efficient in our goal. So as we grow, we need to develop and try to have a bigger impact in the design of new laws and policies to promote a more robust digital ecosystem, a more just ecosystem to promote culture and for a better quality internet. And finally, as Wikimedians, and considering the institutions that we engage with, we need to work together on developing and protecting knowledge. So I will show you a campaign, or I will mention a campaign that is currently in place in Brazil about the concerning the football museum or the soccer museum. As you know, we love football. I don't know if there are any Colombians here in the room because they beat us yesterday. But this is a campaign, an initiative with the Football Museum and with UN Women. The campaign was about female players in sports. So there are articles on Wikipedia, on social media, requesting the Brazilian Olympic Committee to disseminate these images under an open license. They have a repository of the images of female athletes, but all images are protected. And a Brazilian gymnast just won a medal in the Pan American Games, and she wants her picture to be open access. So we are requesting the committee, the images are open access. So this is just one example coming from Brazil, and something that has been for us a learning process. We were just Wikimedians concerned about knowledge, but now I have a more strategic perspective about the ecosystem, and we want to adapt a perspective that takes into account the context in the global south as a whole. Thank you. Thank you, Wikimedia, for your invitation. Thank you to the panelists. I want to thank you all so much for these initiatives from UNESCO. It is great to see how the actions that we are implementing actually reach people like you, the love for culture, for heritage, It's really something that satisfies us deeply and personally motivates me to continue on this journey, knowing that we have allies like you. I was asked to speak about UNESCO's work. When we speak about heritage and emergencies, we have three main initiatives. We work at diplomatic, statutory, and operational levels. In terms of diplomatic work, we speak about meetings like this, high-level meetings, working with the UN system, trying to protect and include heritage and culture in global agendas to protect and safeguard culture on the ground. One of the most important results in terms of diplomacy, and I will read, is when we made it possible for the Security Council of the UN to adopt 2 resolutions in the adoption of heritage in emergencies. That set an important precedent, and the destruction of heritage is already considered a war crime. And as a precedent, we have the court on the Hague, and the perpetrator of the Timbuktu archive destruction was sentenced to prison as a result of these acts. The UN Council's resolution has to do with protecting conflict in case of armed conflict after the conflict in the Arab states, and these conflicts also, but about prevention on illicit trafficking of cultural rights as a result of the destruction and culture. So this is the diplomatic framework in which we work. When we speak about the statutory framework, we speak about the international instruments the UNESCO work with, which are called resolutions and conventions. We work with 6 cultural conventions that cover everything in terms of tangible or intangible heritage, and we speak about intangible or immaterial heritage and cultural industries. It is important to remember that when a country ratifies one of these conventions, they take on a responsibility to protect their heritage, and the international community takes on the responsibility of protecting that heritage as we are all signing and ratifying that convention. You spoke about the World Heritage and the sites that are at risk due to conflict and disasters. That is true. That is something that we need to continue working on and adopt further actions, and these conventions help us do so. The Hague Convention of 1954 to protect heritage in the event of an armed conflict uses the blue labels that I'm sure you saw during your trips to the Middle East. They protect heritage that is of cultural relevance to a country and that might not necessarily be listed in one of the World Heritage lists or recognized with a UNESCO stamp. But that means that this heritage needs to be protected in case of conflict or natural disaster. And that means that we need to train forces, national guards, the military, so when they recognize that sign, they know what to do. They need, for example, when evacuating a building that is protected by that stamp or a museum, they need to protect the art pieces, or if there is an armed conflict, troops should know that that monument or that sign must not be destroyed. We've been successful in the implementation of that convention, for example, in Yemen with the historical cities of Sivan and Sana, where instructions were provided and we were able to prevent the coalition from bombing these cities. We are now working on the reconstruction of certain areas. Also the protection of the World Heritage, that you spoke about it already, and how to protect heritage. There are programs and actions in place. And another convention that is working quite is working on this is the Immaterial Heritage Convention. If we consider that immaterial heritage is very vulnerable in conflict, and that is a living heritage that goes from one generation to the next, and many times in the event of an armed conflict that involves displacement or disruption of the social fabric in cities and communities, that transference is disrupted and it might be lost. So we work on protecting that living heritage in the event of conflict and the disruption in that transference, and protecting the living heritage. There are other conventions, I won't get into much detail, but that's the general idea of what we do. Now, in terms of the operational framework, we have different funds and programs that help preserve heritage in the event of a disaster. One of our more popular funds is the Emergency Heritage Fund that works on preventing disaster. We do training, we develop plans for prevention and action in the event of a disaster, to protect heritage in the event of an armed conflict, and everything about how to manage heritage in the event of a natural disaster. This fund also takes action whenever we have had a natural disaster or a problem. For example, the Rio de Janeiro museum, when the fire happened, we sent an emergency mission of experts to actually assess the damages at the museum. We've also taken emergency action and recovery action for different monuments and building in the event of, for example, disaster or conflict. For example, the explosion in Beirut that destroyed a large part of the historical city. We provided funds to rebuild some of these buildings, and the fund has worked quite extensively in these actions.
And our field offices also participate, as our Montevideo office that covers Argentina and Paraguay. In this fund, we get a request for action. We send it, and everything works. If the committee accepts it, the proposal is implemented immediately. Therefore, this tool is very useful in this type of situation. UNESCO does not immediately act in a conflict or a disaster. So this tool allows us to act more quickly and help even if we are not deployed. Other types of actions. We had a Cash for Work European Union project in Yemen. We worked with groups of young people. We have trained them to rebuild large buildings, many using bricks. Many of these buildings have been destroyed. The idea is to protect trades, and these are specific trades that are necessary to restore an old building, to work with cast, with moldings, and with heritage on the ground. And it also creates jobs, because these young people do not have are not employed in because the country is at war. These are different types of programs that focus on different objectives, and in this way we try to provide support to rebuild and protect this heritage in a time of conflict. We also have UNESCO chairs at different universities in different countries. They address different topics. We also have partnerships with different institutions, for instance with the Wikimedia. They've also been working with intangible heritage and heritage in conflict. The good thing about this is that we can talk to everyone. We're with local, national governments, and also with associations and NGOs. Our mandate is quite wide. We can also create partnerships with civil society groups to work on preserving heritage. This is a brief summary of our actions. Thank you so much for the invitation.
We have some minutes for questions, so if anyone wants to have more information about anything that Nazima, Joao, or Arcida present today? No? Well, I do have a question though. Actually, I know that Joao talked about this in his presentation, and a lot of ideas, concrete ideas that I think that are quite interesting, and I probably will be talking about this with you later. I will make one question, and I really hope that you can answer it regarding your context, right? How do you see, how do you think that international institutions like UNESCO or others can benefit from this wonderful movement that is the Wikimedia movement, its engagement capacity and even technical capacities, right? But also, how do you see, you as Wikimedians, that we can advocate to have more representation of local culture heritage in this protection danger list, for instance, the ones that UNESCO is doing or the governments are creating, to address more attention, more information, or even more resources for its protection? That's it. Please, Nassima. Very close to the mic.
I think that project-based collaborations and also long-term collaborations between different Wikimedia chapters and user groups from one side and UNESCO from the other side can really lead to some extraordinary achievements. And one model that I aspire to one day, and I already discussed it with some Wikimedians and also with Fiona, is having UNESCO youth forums that are already taking place, having forums that are around or in connection with the Wikimedia movement. The simple idea is to bring youth or young professionals from different countries and give them a training about how to use the Wikimedia platforms and tools in order to document heritage in their countries. And one good thing about UNESCO Youth Forums is that there is always a follow-up of the forum, which is in form of call for projects, and then there is support for selected projects. So imagine if within maybe 5 days or even 3 days, we have a selection of youth from a specific region or from maybe the world, and giving them all the skills and the trainings about how to use Wikimedia projects in a very project-based format where they are applying what they learned immediately within the forum. And then afterwards, they are called to present projects and initiatives in their countries. I think that we will be building not only capacity, but also equipping future advocates and future trainers in their countries that can inspire others and lead to a more sustainable creation of more heritage professional Wikimedians that will create more projects.
Thank you, Nassima.
Então, acho que essa é uma pergunta difícil.
I think it's a hard but interesting question. I think that within Wikimedia, this really guides us because all types of knowledge are important. Why? Because we collect, produce, and protect knowledge. When we think about a monument, for instance, things like get very specific, and we have a number of parameters that many times are political in nature. I think that we need to rethink, for instance, what a monument is. And organizations like UNESCO and others, I know the reality of many national institutions such as WIFAM and others. So we should consider a wider definition of what a monument is. And Alcida talked about protecting this heritage from a more local perspective. We need to rebuild things, and this is something that Wikimedia and UNESCO can do together in order to have a new understanding of what monuments are, in order to defend them more broadly. From Wikimedia, we have different initiatives such as Wiki Loves Monuments. So it's not just about being limited by some laws that sometimes are influenced by the government. We also need a more participatory perspective regarding what local communities think must be preserved. And it's not just what rulers believe in that given community. For instance, Wiki Loves Popular Culture is an initiative that can provide a more participatory perspective. I think that with the UNESCO, Wikimedia and UN Women, we have a huge potential to work with other non-governmental organizations that enable us to work more systemically. Sometimes we distance ourselves from practice, but this makes for a more sustainable and long-lasting ecosystem. Well, I think that this information you're uploading is important. You talked about millions of visits to your record, and you talked about information uploaded to the web, and that's already very useful because these are data that we use as reference. We use the data to work and obtain information when we create projects. Also, we can sign different agreements and take more planned and organized action through partnerships. We can create roadmaps so that we can act together with the same objective in mind. For instance, Middle East Wikimedia has a work plan to improve the work of rebuilding some sites. The idea is to have more options when we work with donors. And this is better when we have solid institutions, and we should use this information as well. You have Wikimedians almost in every country, so this is a network of people that are passionate about this and that are volunteers as well. I think that we should make the most of them from the system. It's not just about having these discussion panels or specific actions. We need to work for the long term and harness your arms that allow us to work and reach in many areas that many times we cannot reach. I think we should have a strategic and long-lasting partnership with organizations like yours. And also, we should make the most of your data and request personalized data so that we can implement it to our projects.
Just a minute to thank you, the three of you, Nasima, Joao, Alcira, for being here. Thank you all of you also for joining us. And this was a wonderful conversation. Thank you so much for your time.